First and foremost, as always, it goes without saying but condolences. Now people need to remember that there is no such thing as pressing the reset button or do-overs in life. When you commit to your badman persona or GM persona and use those tools to essentially rob another person for their cash, their money in a moped deal gone wrong because you assume that you're bigger and badder than them and more thorough than your rival, you have to know that sometimes those consequences are going to be dire. Case in point, 16-year-old Kamari Johnson, who was bladed in West London on May 24th of last year, 2024, after he took a guy's money and then tried to ride away. Now he was only 16 years old and he paid the ultimate price. Kamari Johnson lost his life in a public and brutal fashion. So when 16-year-old Kamari Johnson's friends and family were alerted by police that Kamari had tragically been bladed and he was pronounced dead, unalived on a cold West London street of Bourne Avenue in Hayes, it was as though someone had turned off all the lights and pressed mute. Their world had collapsed and was shrouded in darkness. The first thing that would have entered their heads was why Kamari? Why would someone do this to him? He was popular, a joker, friendly, and he wouldn't hurt anyone. But sadly, he decided to rob an associate. Kamari Johnson was just a 16-year-old teenager, but he had been bladed by a 17-year-old teenager who has not been named, who had wielded a long blade, 30 centimeters. He carried it with him just in case people tried to mess with him. Now originally, he had met up with Kamari Johnson in order to discuss the sale of a stolen moped. Now Kamari was the seller and the unnamed teenager was the buyer. In Kamari's final moments, he had taken the 17-year-old teenager's money, had quickly climbed on his moped, pressed the throttle and then decided to ride away. Soon after, on Friday, May 24th of last year, police would receive over a dozen calls from frantic members of the public in order to explain that a teenager was laying in the street of Bourne Avenue, Hayes, West London, at an estimated time of 1:30 p.m, and some people even recorded the incident, giving a play-by-play narration. This was a very public time. Now Kamari had come off the moped after he tried to ride away, and he was left laying in the street in a heap of bones, wasted potential, broken dreams and polyester. And within 24 hours, a 17-year-old teenager had been sought after by the Metropolitan Police Serious Crime Unit. The 17-year-old had actually handed himself in with the help of his dad. He was placed in handcuffs and then read his rights. His charges were the M and also possession of a blade in a public place. All charges that the 17-year-old categorically denied under the claim of self-defense. Now in court, the prosecution set out the facts of the case. On May 24th of 2024, Kamari, a 17-year-old teenager who could not be named, had made inquiries over the sale of a moped. He had then met up with a friend who he used to play football with. Kamari's name was brought up as someone who could source a moped. Now with the help of that friend, a meet-up had been arranged between Kamari Johnson and the unnamed teenager, and they used Snapchat in order to communicate, with the meeting point being Carnarvon Drive. Now the 17-year-old teenager told Kamari that he had £160 for the stolen moped. Kamari tutted and explained that the price was £180. He did not want to let the moped go for anything less. Now think about this, there was only a price difference of just £20. £20. Now negotiations stalled. The 17-year-old teenager and Kamari then agreed on the sale. Now call it naivety, but the unnamed teenager had shown faith and trust in Kamari. He handed over the cash. Now in return, Kamari took the money and then pretended as though the 17-year-old teenager did not exist. Kamari simply pocketed the money and then sat on the moped and then rode away. Now it's not a suggestion, but it's a fact that Kamari had scammed the 17-year-old teenager, robbed him, choose whatever word you like. The lack of respect left the 17-year-old teenager fuming and in a rage and also angry. Every possible negative emotion that you could think of. So the unnamed teenager travelled a short distance from Carnarvon Drive to Bourne Avenue, which was close to Kamari's address. After all, that 17-year-old knew where Kamari was, and on finding Kamari in such quick succession, there was no talking about returning the money or giving up the moped. Instead, the 17-year-old teenager had taken his large blade out, machete in style and 30 centimeters in length, according to witnesses. Ready for action, the 17-year-old then began to swipe and swish and jab at Kamari. The blow was devastating on impact. Kamari is said to have tried to flee the scene on the moped and managed to ride a few meters, but every step of the way he was hunted and pursued by the 17-year-old teenager who was on foot. He was relentless. Kamari then came off the moped and then collapsed on the street in front of witnesses, where the impact was to his heart and the vital organ was left in ribbons. Kamari stood no chance. The 17-year-old teenager had committed himself to committed himself to the K of Kamari Johnson at the very moment he headed for Kamari's home. So in essence, Kamari's life was not considered more than a minimum of £160 or a maximum of £180. Think about that. Now, despite Kamari Johnson being a robber or a thief or a scammer, whatever label you want to use, he was also someone's son, a friend, a student, a cousin, a nephew, and he did not deserve to die. But again, actions have some very dire consequences, and you can't pick what happens to you once you set everything in motion. Now, it has to be said, where the moped came from, that information has not been disclosed. However, from the Snapchat logs and messages, there was clear exchange that explained that the moped was not clean and it was in fact stolen. Now, Kamari was declared dead at the scene despite paramedics and ambulance crew attending to his wounds within a few minutes of the incident taking place. There was nothing they could do for him, and within 24 hours, the unnamed teenager had arrived at Hayes police station with his dad in order to discuss the incident further. Now, police already had been given witness statements, and police also believed a combination of CCTV and Ring doorbell camera and footage that had been captured by witnesses had captured all the important moments of the K, such as the unnamed teenager turning into Kamari's road, and 20 seconds later Kamari, who was gravely injured, riding away on a black moped, and also the alleged K chasing out Kamari on foot, carrying a blade in full view, 30 centimeters in length and also curved. So open and closed was the case that a witness who had recorded the incident had even given a narration of the commotion step by step that they had witnessed, explaining the length had been used and turned to red. Until his trial that had taken place this week at the start of January, roughly January the 6th, the 17-year-old teenager had been placed on remand at Feltham YO Institute. The 17-year-old teenager was also quick to deny manslaughter, DM, and also having a blade in public. When interviewed by police on 3 separate occasions, the 17-year-old teenager refused to answer any questions regarding DM, but he did prepare a short written statement that said, "I deny the offences of DM and to confirm that I acted in self-defence at all times." And his defence team set a narrative in motion that this was an unnamed 17-year-old teenager who had been scammed, left embarrassed and was in fear for his life. So much fear that he had no choice but to act and use the blade. The trial continues. Again, condolences. Stay safe.